Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my shop. I've done a video in the past about how to start a taxidermy shop, but I've had several questions about what somebody needs if they just want to mount one buck. And I never really thought about it before, but I've never made a video talking about that. So rather than just get really broad, I'm just going to tell you what you need, just a minimal amount in order to mount one deer. I may miss something. If I miss something, ask me in the comments below and I'll try to make up, whatever it is that y'all are looking for. If y'all don't mind, I'm going to work and talk so I can get some of this stuff done. But anyway, let's get started. What we're going to need to begin with is, obviously, you're going to need a deer cape. You're going to need it tanned, or you're going to have to do dry preservative, either one. I'm not going to go through that process. If you want to know how to tan a deer, you can go to my tanning video, and I can walk you through a bunch of that, because that's a whole nother set of supplies and everything else. But one thing you will need is a deer form. It will be a foam form. You'll have to measure your cape to do all that stuff. There's another video on that. And I will link all of these videos in the description to where, that specific stuff of how to do those steps. You can go back and you can review to learn how to do all that. But you're going to need a foam form. You're going to need some glass eyes. You're going to need some ear liners if you're going to do that rather than Bondo. If you're going to use Bondo inside the ears, you will need some Bondo. Now, aside from that, when you go to get this thing ready, what you're going to need is you're going to have to take the antlers and you're going to have to trim the skull cap. You're going to have to get that cut off evenly to where it will fit in the top of that form. So I would suggest buying a bone saw. Let me show you what I've got. This right here is the bone saw that I use. It is a professional bone saw. You can buy these blades. I've had this one right here for probably 10 years. And it does a great job. This is a 17.5 inch. It is a Camlock professional saw. If y'all can see the name and the size and all right there on the top of the saw. But you can order this from taxidermy supply companies. Also, for fleshing purposes, I use a number 11 X-Acto blade. This is a off-brand right here, but I like the handle on it. But main thing is I use these number 11 blades. You can use a scalpel if you prefer. I like this one because it gets down and around the edges of the eyes. Very small spots. You can use the corner of that blade. You're going to need you a fleshing beam of some kind. Some sort of either a piece of wood that kind of comes up to a point. Some people use PVC pipe. You're going to need something to be able to flesh that deer out and get it salted before you go into your tanning process, or even if you send it off to the tannery. You're going to want to get all of that meat and fat off of that, get it salted, and get that cape to where it's stable to keep all the bacteria from growing on it. All right, so you got your cape to the point to where it's either tanned or ready for dry preservative. So once you've got your form, you're going to have to prep that form. It's going to need to be routed around the mouth. So when you do the mouth, I use a Dremel tool with a little cutting bit on it. I'll have all that in the description below what you're going to need. But you're going to have to cut that lip line out. You're going to have to cut your tear ducts. Get that kind of stuff prepped, and you're going to want to prep the form. I use a piece of wood with some screws in it. This is all I've got right here. I actually just made this out of a piece of wood with a couple screws in it, where you can use that to rasp that form down, get rid of some of that smooth outside. It gives that glue something to stick to. I'll also tap this into the form and make little holes in it where it kind of anchors that glue in place, makes it stick a whole lot better. So the tucking tools that I use when you get ready to put this thing together, these stainless steel tools, they're not all that expensive, and I've had these for about 10 years, so they should last you forever as long as you don't bend them or break them or do something really crazy. You're going to need your mounting stand, something to screw the deer onto. The first several that I mounted, I actually had a pallet leaning up against a table. So really all you got to do is have the deer mounted to something to where you can put it together. Now, if you don't have a mounting stand that rotates and swivels or anything else, it is a really big pain to have to get down in the floor and try to tuck the mouth while it is turned upright instead of being able to flip it upside down. Also, you're going to have to worry about whether or not you can see everything as far as details with lighting and that sort of stuff. When you can flip it upside down, you can look at gaps, in the lips, you can look at gaps in the eyes, different little things like that you cannot do when it's mounted to something permanent. So I would suggest getting you a mounting stand if you're going to, plan on doing several deer. Sometimes you can find one for either really cheap or somebody will let you borrow one if you just want to mount one. But they're not very, very cheap. So it's one of those things where If you just want to mount one deer, you might be able to just build something out of wood that you might be able to flip upside down, or you may even just be okay with just mounting it, completely upright. That's entirely up to you. So once you get ready to mount that up, you're going to need hide paste. I would suggest Pro One professional hide paste. I've used about 3 or 4 different kinds, and for me, that is the number one. It's very sticky, holds very well, and you don't really have to pin it if you don't want to, as long as every day you kind of check on it, make sure all the air is out of it, make sure it's holding real good on that form. You just want to press it down and make sure that air is out of it. That's the biggest thing. Now, something else that I did not have when I first got started was a pin pusher. This brad pusher right here. Go ahead and buy you one of these. These are really cheap and spring loaded. You can put little brads in there and stick in, into the form wherever you want to hold that hide down so it doesn't come loose. And especially on your first deer, this right here will save you a whole bunch of headache in the future. All right, I would suggest getting some nitrile or latex gloves. That way you can keep some of the chemicals off your hands, keep some of the glue off your hands. It's just something you can peel off and throw away just as soon as you get something nasty all over you. It makes it a lot easier for fleshing too, especially if you have to answer the phone or anything crazy. At least you can rip them gloves off, throw them in the garbage. They don't cost a whole lot. And obviously you're going to want a garbage can and some garbage bags close by, to throw all your junk in. You're going to need some modeling clay. Just regular air dry clay is all that I use. I don't buy any kind of critter clay or anything more expensive. But I do like to build my ear butts, and I do like to build it around my eyes right before I mount my deer. Some people prefer to do all that ahead of time and like something that dries a little bit harder. So it's kind of a personal preference, but you will need some sort of clay to build up around those eyes and to build up in the ear butts. You're going to need some cape thread. When you get your cape on and you get ready to stitch up the back of that cape, you're going to want some kind of cape thread. Some people prefer natural sinew. I do have some of that. You can split it into pieces. If you need to stitch smaller holes and stuff like that, it works great with a little bit thinner size piece of thread. On the backs, the main stitch, I prefer bowstring. This is it right here. It's B55 is the size I use, B55 bowstring. And this stuff is incredibly strong. I mean, it's made for putting on a bow, like a recurve, long bow, compound bow, hunting bows. So it's made not to break, so it's really strong. It's also waxed so that it slides through there really easy. You're going to need a cape needle. I would suggest an L-shaped cape needle. These are my favorites. Some people use a longer needle. I like this right here. I think this is a 2.5 inch cape needle. The end of it, the point, is sharpened on 2 sides and it's flat on the top. So it's actually got 3 separate sides, which creates almost like a knife blade in 3 different places. So it cuts as it goes in. You do not want a cone-shaped needle, something like you'd use for stitching fabrics. It will not want to push through that leather. You almost have to pre-punch it with a leather punch before you can get it. This right here will poke through even very thick hides. So that's what I would suggest, is some kind of a cutting needle. And I really like the L-shaped needle because you can put that in between your fingers when you're going to push that through that leather. So you've got everything ready to put your deer together. All you got to do, once you've got your antlers cut, you just got to make sure that you have got some screws to put through the skull cap into the form. The form is going to have wood on the top of it. So when you go to screw that down, it's going to screw into some plywood. You're going to have plywood on the back of the form. You're going to have to screw your deer to your pedestal. You're going to have to screw it to your wall hanger, stuff like that. So you're going to need some screws. I personally use 2.5 inch and 3 inch screws in the skull cap. I like to use the 3 inch in the front where the skull sits up a little bit higher off the head. As it drops down, I'll use 2.5s in the back, put them at a little bit of an angle to where they press the rack into the cut of that form. That seems to work well for me, but you will need some screws obviously to put that together. So let's say that you've got your deer, your eyes are set, your ear butts are built, you've got the cape on, you've got it glued up, got it stitched up, all that is ready to go. So then really all you're waiting on it to do is dry. Now while it's drying, I would suggest putting some saran wrap, some sort of cling wrap into the nose. You can use plastic for this of any kind, plastic bags, anything, it really doesn't matter. But you want to cram that down into the nostrils. What that'll do is it'll hold that skin up against that form, and keep the nostril skin from coming loose, because it will dry that way if you don't keep that pressed down. And then once everything is dry and ready to go, which you can see what I'm doing right now too. I've actually got, see right here, I've got little strips of cardboard stapled to where I stitch the deer up. When that deer is completely dry, once I'm ready to do my epoxy work, I'll go ahead and pop these out so that I can comb him and get him groomed for the final time. But that holds that down so slick that you can't even tell there's a stitch there. Like it does a great job of making sure the hair lays flat as it's drying, because if that hair isn't groomed properly, when that hide goes to dry, it's going to dry, and whatever way that hair is facing, that's the direction it's going to be from now on. So you want to make sure that that is right where you want it when that thing dries. Now, once you've got it dried, you're going to need some epoxy. I like to use Epoxy Sculpt. It's probably one of the most popular epoxies that there is for taxidermy work, and it dries rock hard, it dries quickly, and it's very, very good quality stuff. You can paint it, you can sand it. When you are applying it while it's still soft, you can wet it and it will slick down and smooth down to where there's no transition into the hide. If you're building antlers, you can build antler with it. There won't be any transition in the antler. It's just awesome, awesome product. This is what it looks like right here. You can buy it in different sizes. These are 8-ounce containers, which this would be a pound if you were to order this. This is the 1 pound container. It comes with both of these. There's a part A and a part B. You can see this is brown. I use brown, I use pink. I use brown, pink, and I use the natural for the antlers. I also use black. All of those, like I said, I'll have all those links down below. But you're going to need that around the eyes, if there's any gaps around the base of the antler, in the nostrils. I also use it to rebuild my nose pads. Some people do not do that. They like to use Mod Podge and build the nodules. But I personally like the consistency of rebuilding the entire nose pad. That's just a personal preference. But once you have got all of your epoxy work done, you're going to have to paint. So once you get ready to do your paint work, you're going to need an airbrush compressor, an airbrush hose, and an airbrush. Then you'll also need paints to go with it. Some people prefer oil-based paints. Some people prefer water-based. I myself like water-based paint. It's a lot safer. You don't have to worry about quite as much. Wherein I will wear a mask when I'm painting, but at the same time, if I got to do some touch-up work and stuff, don't feel like throwing the mask on. I don't have a whole lot of ventilation in here at all. So the water-based paint is not near as dangerous breathing it in and stuff as oil-based paint. And it's also not quite as permanent. It does need to be sealed once you have painted something with it. I like to use Krylon sealer on it, and I'll seal over the eyes, the nose, and stuff like that. But it also is easier to remove. So like when you get it on the eyes and stuff, you can wet your finger a little bit, wipe it on there, and in just a few seconds, you can just peel that right off of the eyeglass. Everything's very easy to clean up. It's easier to clean your airbrush. You can clean that up with like water and alcohol, stuff like that is just easier to use in my opinion. It's a little bit more user friendly. For somebody just getting started, I would definitely suggest it so that if you do mess something up, you can wash it off, start over again. First several deer that I did, all I did was hand paint, and you can do that, but it's very, very difficult. And an airbrush and compressor, some of the kits you can even buy that comes with everything are not really all that expensive for what you're getting. So if you're gonna try to do it, if you want it to look just a whole lot better, I would suggest airbrushing, especially when you get inside the ears and stuff. Anywhere there's hair, you're not going to be able to hand paint it without getting paint all over everything. It is just a disaster. Also with an airbrush, you can spray a color and then spray another color over the top of it, and it will self-blend. It will blend, together and make it look really natural, where it's a progressive color fade rather than hard lines and brush marks and brush strokes, stuff like that. So, I would buy that even if you're going to only do one. As you're finishing your deer up, as you start getting into stuff like cape repair, hole repair, that kind of thing, you will need to get you stuff like fiber tack, glue, Gorilla Glue gel works really well on stuff. flocking fibers, which I've got videos on all of that stuff. So if you need any kind of the velvet fibers and stuff like that are great for repair work and to use as flocking, but any of that stuff, I've got other videos on it. But it isn't a necessity, like I said, unless you've got some damage and stuff on your hides. You are going to need either an impact and a drill, or just a drill with also, the bits in it for whatever style screws that you buy. I've just got a regular DeWalt 20 volt impact and a DeWalt 20 volt drill that I use for pretty much everything. I also have got the 20 volt DeWalt reciprocating saw. I prefer the Diablo blades or some kind of demolition blade that are the long ones. That's what I use to cut my skull caps out when the heads are brought to me. They also come in handy for trimming the ear liners, the way that I use my ear liners and cut them. That's what I use for that. And just for any kind of general purpose. There'll be stuff that you're gonna have to trim, even altering forms and stuff. I use that same saw for that. You're gonna have epoxy to clean that up, make that look good. And I would suggest using epoxy sculpt and not the old style of putty like they used to use, where it was more like a wax. That stuff does not look good, and it is not permanent. I mean, over a period of time, it don't matter if it's 50 years from now, you can still reach up in there with something and peel it out of there, and it feels like candle wax. So do not use that. Don't shortchange yourself on the epoxy. Go ahead and get epoxy sculpt. Use a good 2-part epoxy. It will smooth out better. It's easier to use, easier to work with, all of the above. Now, the only other thing that I would highly recommend if you ever decide to do, any number of deer heads, would be a fleshing machine. You do not have to use a fleshing machine to just mount one deer if you don't want to. Now, the difference is night and day. I used just a scalpel for years and years and years with no fleshing machine. But once I got my fleshing machine, I realized the importance of the quality, of the speed. It even cuts fewer holes than a scalpel when you're trying to use it to thin a hide. And that is going to be your number one expense. If you want to try to get toward perfection, you're going to have a fleshing machine. If you don't worry too much about that and you just want to mount a deer, you can get that thing tanned. You can get it mounted without using a fleshing machine, and you can do a pretty good job, honestly. Just to run through what I used on my first deer when I did not ever plan on doing more than one, when I was just going to try one and see what happened. I had a pallet, I had a form, I had ear liners, I had glass eyes, I had modeling clay, I had epoxy sculpt, I had a carburetor screwdriver for tucking, I did have my tucking tools so I could use them around the eyes and the nostrils. I had hide paste, my number 11 X-Acto knife, I had a DeWalt impact, drill, and reciprocating saw with the demolition blade. I had a Dremel tool with a cutting tip on it. I had screws, and I hand painted everything. Go ahead and buy you an airbrush compressor, even if you're only gonna do one, because you'll be so mad by the time you try to hand paint that thing and make it look like you want it to, that you'll end up buying one anyway and redoing it. That's the one thing I did not have when I mounted my first deer, that if I did have, it would have made the entire mount look better, just because the way that paint blends while it's wet. Other than that, I can't really think of anything else that I used on my first deer. But like I said before, what I'm going to do is all those videos that I think will help you figure out what you're doing, even if you're only doing one, I'll go ahead and post those links in the description when you go back to this video where you can play it. Just go down where it says description. I'll have all those links down in that. And what I'm going to do too, I've got an Amazon influencer store, is what Amazon calls it now. But what it allows me to do, it just takes all of my links from all the stuff that I use, rather than having individual links. I can put all those products into one place, and you can click on that link and go into that store. And all it has is a bunch of categories of all of the stuff that I use with those links to those products. So rather than having to search them one at a time, you can just go into my store and click on each one of those links. And it doesn't cost you any more to buy that stuff on Amazon. All it does is organize all that so that I can send that to you, and it makes it Just streamlines that process. Now, I do get paid commissions off those links for the stuff I sell for Amazon, but there's no upcharge for you to buy from those links. So it's easier for you to get to that. I get paid for helping them out, and I get to help y'all out so that you don't have to search for all this stuff. But I'll have all my paint colors in there. Anything that Amazon sells that I buy off Amazon, all of those supplies and stuff, I will have in that store. Now, if there's anything that y'all don't see, or if there's any questions y'all have about any of that process or anything that I might have forgotten about or skipped, I'm sure there's something, please just comment below in this video. Don't send me a private message asking about it if you can, because there will be other people with that same question, more than likely. Comment below, ask all about that, and I will try to answer the best that I can on all of that so people can see and read in the future. I do have some new merchandise. My new Cedar Ridge logo that I've changed it to. I went into my spread shop and I went ahead and loaded up my design. So now you can get the shirts, the hoodies, the mugs, all that kind of stuff with the new logo on it. Also, I've got the stickers on there where you can buy the new stickers. Appreciate it if y'all hit that subscribe button if you have not already. We will see y'all on the next video.